Hey kids, Father Brad here, and it's kind of cool outside, so I busted out the sweater vest. You know, why the sweater vest, you ask? Well, because you want your body to be warm, but you want full free range motion on the hands. So when I go, let us pray, I'm not hindered, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, today I'm talking about vocations. Vocations. Vocare is the Latin word. Shout out to my 9th grade who loves the Latin. Vocare is the root, and it means to call. So basically, it's your calling. Your calling by God. There's a couple things we want to focus on today. First, the universal call to holiness, that we're all called to holiness, and what that means, and how do we do it. And secondly, yes, how do you become holy, which is the universal call. And then vocations, like the actual individual big V vocations, and then how to discern. So those are our objectives for this class. Hold on, let me sip. Oh, I'm going to turn Mary to you. Okay, so first I'm calling on St. Paul to tell us about universal call to holiness. He says this in 1 Corinthians, verse 12. He says, as a body is one, though it has many parts, and all the parts of the body, though many, are one body, so also Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slaves or free persons, and we're all given to drink of one Spirit. Now listen to this. Paul's really cool here. Now the body is not a single part, but many. If a foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it does not for this reason belong any less to the body. Or if an ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it does not for this reason belong any less to the body. If the whole body were an eye, think about that, how creepy would that be? It's like Halloween time. If the whole body was an eye, there'd be a lot of eyes. It'd just be one big eye, like the eye of Sauron. Where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God placed the parts, each one of them, in the body as He intended. If they were all one part, where would the body be? So basically, just like our bodies, just like ourselves, we have one goal, one destination, one job ultimately. But we might have different roles in getting there. You have to have feet in order to run. You have to have a heart that pumps the blood, and the lungs oxygenate the blood so that oxygen can get to the limbs so you can, do your thing. So we're all called to be saints, but we're all part of one body, so we're all called to be saints. This is called the universal call to holiness. Okay, the universal call of holiness. Now, way back in the day, and sometimes throughout history, people have thought, oh, if you really want to be holy, you just become a priest or a nun. And obviously, priests and nuns should be holy. But everybody's called to be holy. Everybody's called to be set apart, right? Holy, the Latin word is sanctus, sacred, and that means set apart. So you look different than the world. And you're called to be that. Parents and grandparents and everyone in the church is called to be holy. Now, there are two different types of vocations. One is ecclesiastical vocations, and the other is the common priesthood, okay? Let me break those things down. Ecclesiastical vocations are vocations that are centered in the church, like building, right? The parish. I'm thinking of priests. I'm thinking of religious, monks, friars, people whose job is the church itself. Ecclesiastical is another word for church. It's like a fancy word, Greek this time. Shout out to my 9th grade. Greek for church is ecclesia. So ecclesiastical vocations are those that are directly in the church, involving the mass, involving the sacraments, involving like prayer in the church. Now there's the common priesthood. We're all called to be priests. We're all called to offer sacrifice. But if you're part of the laity, or those who are not priests or deacons, you're called to be the laity. And your job is not necessarily in the church. You go to church. You get fed in the church, but your job is in the world. A good way I like to put this is, I can't be at every grocery store. I'm only one of me. I like to go to Rouse's. I can't be in every barber shop. I can't be in every classroom, in every school, on every football team, and every cheer team. I can't be wherever you need to be. So the gospel is spread in those places, not primarily by me. I give you at PSR and at Mass and in the homily the words, and then you go to those places. That's where your job is. Now, sometimes people think, oh, if I'm really holy lay person or married person, I'm going to be an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, or I'm going to read at Mass, and that's our main job. Like, those are the best. And that's actually not necessarily true. We need Eucharistic ministers, extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. We need lectors. We need altar servers. That's true. But you're supposed to go from there out into the world. Okay? It's called the common priesthood. Here's a Lumen Gentium. Man, I am destroying you with other languages. Okay, Lumen Gentium is a book written in the 1960s by the bishops of the world in the Vatican Council, the second one. It says this: fortified by so many and such powerful means of salvation, all the faithful, not just one, not just two, not just the Pope, not just Winnie the Pooh. I just wanted to rhyme. All the faithful, whatever their condition or state, are called by the Lord, each in his own way, to that perfect holiness whereby the Father himself is perfect. Right? That's what Jesus says. He says, be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect. He wasn't just talking to priests or nuns. He's talking to ninth graders. He's talking to kindergartners. He's talking to your moms and your dads and your grandparents. He's talking to doctors and lawyers and nurses. Everybody's called to holiness. Now, how do you become holy? Well, you avoid evil and you choose good and you receive grace. Kind of sounds simple, but we spend our whole life perfecting that. We spend our whole life figuring that out. Right? Turning away from evil and turning towards good, following the 10 Commandments, living out the Beatitudes, and then receiving the sacraments. Right? The sacraments are the most important thing we can do in our life to connect us to Christ, sure vessels of grace, and God makes us holy. So if you're doing that, if you're avoiding evil, following the 10 Commandments, choosing the good, loving people around you, following the Beatitudes, and receiving the sacraments, you're going to be holy. You're going to be a saint. You're going to heaven. Raise your hand if you want to go to heaven. Okay, Miss Barras wants to go to heaven. She raised her hand behind the camera. Hopefully you did too, because heaven is like what you're made for. You're made for relationship with God forever. And if you do those things, you will be holy. Again, it's not really about whether you're a priest or a nun or a married person. We're all called to holiness. Paige LaCour is calling? Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to call her back. Actually, hold on. Hey Paige, I'm recording a PSR video. Okay, hey, you want to say anything to the kids? No? Okay, well, Paige says be holy. Okay, bye. Okay, so finally, vocations and how to discern. So again, to reiterate, vocare means to call in Latin. God calls us, and he calls us to one thing first, the whole body. He calls us to love, to fulfill our baptismal vows. Saint Therese is a great, beautiful saint of the 1890s. She was the late 1800s, early 1900s. Well, she died really early 1900s. But she said in her diary, she said, I have finally found my vocation, and that is to love. And she was a nun, right? So she had a religious vocation. But ultimately, everybody's vocation is to love. Everyone's call is to love. Even if you never become a nun, never become a priest, never become a consecrated virgin in the world, never become a married person. Let's say that never happens. You still have a vocation. It's to love. It's to fulfill the vows that you were made at your baptism, that you renewed probably in confirmation. Well, none of y'all have yet, but okay. You will. Okay, now here's the distinction. Little v vocations versus big V vocations. Little v vocations are smaller individual calls for a particular maybe job. Think of it as like a job, like to be a doctor, to be a teacher, to be a lawyer, right? To work in a church office, to be a youth minister. And even as priests, we can have little v vocations, right? Father Jamin is a canon lawyer. He's called to do things particularly like a particular job at the diocese, even though his big V vocation is priest. Okay, so now let's talk about big V vocation. These are distinguished by vows. So it can't be an actual big V vocation unless there's vows. Okay, so you have to completely give yourself in a vow to another. In marriage, obviously it's your spouse and your future family. In priesthood, it's to the church, right? You marry the church. In religious life, you're giving yourself completely to God. And there's actually something called consecrated life in the world. So it's not single life, right? I wanted to make this distinction. Single life, singlehood isn't a big V vocation. Some might be called to live that in their life because they never got married or never became a priest. But it's not a big V vocation unless you make vows. Unless you say, I am consecrating myself to God, not in a religious order, not in a convent, not in a friary or a monastery or abbey. I'm doing it in the world. So I'm going to be a doctor, a nurse, right? I'm going to work in a church parish, and I'm consecrating myself to Jesus. I'm not going to get married to anyone else. That's consecrated life, and that's a big V vocation. Now, discernment. Discernment is the process of praying about what we believe God is calling us to do. It's a fancy word for like deciding in the process of deciding. You can discern different things. You can discern whether first you're called to, and this is the first step, you discern whether God's calling you to consecrated life. Are you called to be a priest, a religious sister, a nun, a brother, right? Consecrated life. If you're not called to that, then you discern marriage. Who are you called to marry? How do you do that? You got to date, right? That's part of discernment in marriage. Religious discern which religious order, right? Someone who wants to be a nun, she's got to go to different religious orders, and she discerns, what is God calling me to do? Which one? Dominicans? Benedictines? Carmelites? I don't know. God, tell me. Right? Priests have to discern whether they want to be a religious priest or a secular priest, right? A parish priest or a priest that lives in a monastery like the monks at the Abbey in Covington. Right? So there's a lot of discernment. A couple more points about this. One, just because we don't want it now doesn't mean we are not called to it. So as a 10-year-old, well, actually you are in 6th to 11th grade. So as a 12. As a 12-year-old, you might be like, I'm not called to be a priest. That's not actually how you look, but that's what I looked like when I was 12, thinking about being a priest. And I didn't think, but I didn't know. It's cool. You don't have to decide now. You don't have to know now. And just because you don't think that now doesn't mean you're not called to it. Sometimes we're called to things, ultimately, that in the moment, we don't believe we're called to. Like every morning, do you want to get up and go to school? Like, are you like, I am attacking this day. I'm waking up and going to school to better my mind and make me more successful in the future. No, you don't do that. Your mom has to wake you up and say, get out of bed, get in the shower, put the food in your mouth, get in the car, we're going to school. I don't want to go to school. I'm sick. No, you're not sick. Get in the car. You don't want to right then, which is good later. One day, whenever you're 22, it's good that you know some stuff that you learned at school. Because if it was up to you, you'd be a feral child with crazy hair living in the woods. You'd be me. Okay, secondly, God's true calling for us, whatever it is, will make us fulfilled. If God's calling you to it, like if you're like, oh no, God's calling me to be a nun, don't be scared, because you'll be fulfilled. Third, you must be an open vessel and ready to hear, right? So living virtue unclouds our mind. We can have a call and not answer it because we're not listening. It's sin. Another way of saying this is sin makes us stupid. It's called the double darkness of will and intellect. When we sin, we make our will and intellect darkened. Like it's cloudy. It's confusing. I can't make a free decision. I don't know what God's calling me to. I don't know what makes me happy because I'm sinning. Sin makes us stupid. Don't be stupid. Choose virtue and be open to what God's calling you to, and you'll hear it if you're living in virtue, right? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God and their vocation. Lastly, every Catholic ought to first pray about whether they are called to priesthood, religious life, or consecrated life. Every single one of you first ask the question, am I called to be a nun, a priest, a brother, a friar? No? Oh, there you go. Go find your wife. I mean, I think that's true, right, Ainsley? Okay, cool. And last, I said last 3 times. I'm so sorry. I'm going to give you a quote by John Paul II. He spoke it to young people, so he's speaking it to you. He says, "It is Jesus that you seek when you dream of happiness. He is waiting for you when nothing else you find satisfies you. He is the beauty to which you are so attracted. It is He who provoked you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. It is He who urges you to shed the mask of a false life. It is He who reads in your hearts your most genuine choices, the choices that others try to stifle. Don't let other people stifle your vocation. God's got something for you. He's calling you. Might be to be a priest, might be to be married, might be to be religious. Whatever it is, it's going to be a blast. Choose it.